Come on in, we've got seats further in here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ylva Fine Arts Center here on the campus of Bethany Lutheran College. This is our monthly exhibition of guest artists here for the benefit of the Bethany family and the Mankato area community. Our guest artist this month is a familiar face in this room. I was trying to make a mental list of the solo exhibits that I remember from this man, Ouren. I remember full-size wood sculptures, full-size life-size figured wood sculptures. I remember large enlargements of farm implements in wood sculpture. I remember a exhibit of pottery with faces in which everyone was to take a pot home. I remember an exhibit completely made of old magazines and old textbooks in a collage format. I remember cell phone photographs. I remember, there's one more that I'm trying to remember. There it is, found object musical instruments. And that's probably not an exhaustive list. What's 2 exhibits about musical instruments. So I think the thing to know there is that he is constantly inventive. He's constantly finding different ways to express what is in his heart, what comes through his eyes, what's on his mind. The work that we have in front of us is a new direction, and I would encourage you to look at the dates on the cards. A surprising amount of the work here comes from 2025. Let that be a clue about the productivity of this man. Join me in welcoming Ouren.
Thank you. Yeah, I just read an article recently that said traumatic brain injury can make you a genius, and so I must be the smartest guy around. It's been a long time since I did one of these shows. Usually I can do them fairly extemporaneously, but this time I actually have a script that I'm working from. So I'm going to read, and hopefully you'll not fall asleep and wake up at the end with a start and think, wow, he was the smartest guy I ever heard. So, okay, any questions before we get going? All right, so the title of this show, as you may have noticed, is Working from Home. Something many of us literally needed to do during and after COVID, so maybe a little more familiar to many of you than it used to be. For me as an artist and one who makes artwork, the studio or workshop has been the place of refuge where I go to create my work. In my mind, this is a place that is not at or in the home so much as so that the idea of working at home was not something I could really wrap my head around, nor was it desirable, as I tend to create a lot of dust and debris when I make work. I kind of still do, but anyway, but something about that changed for me as I considered using different materials for my artwork. So for many years, I'd been intrigued by art quilts. Anybody know what art quilts are or familiar with them at all? But I enjoyed them for their scale, color, and non-referential imagery. They were akin to modernist paintings from the 1940s and 50s, which I really enjoy. I had been primarily working 3-dimensionally with wood, so the idea of a softer, lighter media got me thinking that if I could start over, I would have been a quilter instead of a sculptor. So I said this to myself with little experience in sewing anything beyond stitching patches on my jeans to extend their life. Sewing machines had frustrated me during a 7th grade home economics project, and I had never returned to learning how to use one. When I sewed, I hand-stitched everything, and everything in this show is handmade, hand-stitched. Working with fibers brings the language of fibers with it. Stitching, weaving, threading, words that become metaphors in our daily lives. If I tug at the threads of the tapestry of my life, I find that my story does not stand alone, but is woven into something much, much larger. My threads are connected to and woven through the stories of others that have come before me. In terms of art making, I usually point to my father's brother, my uncle, who was an artist, builder, and designer. His background as a painter and sculptor opened all kinds of windows and doors for me when I was a child, enabling me to see that there was a whole world of art out there, and by following that thread, there was more to the drawings and small constructions that I was doing. They were connected to something. They were already part of a continuum that I could become part of. My uncle also had a twin sister who became, later in life, a quilter. Her gift as a quilter was that she was a fantastic colorist and could easily make changes to traditional quilt patterns in ways that would take your breath away. Seeing her work got me thinking about older traditional and non-traditional art quilts until the point that I couldn't ignore that prodding. Another part of my personal and artistic tapestry comes from a period in my life when many threads became entwined in mine. In the early 1970s, my father and 4 friends purchased a 1960 Chevrolet Apache pickup together for the purpose of cutting firewood and, it seems, to spend some time together. This is, when I'm referring to this, there's that piece that's in the back there. Several of them were teachers. One was the spouse of a teacher. One was the superintendent of the small K-12 school that I went to. My father went to the same college as one of the teachers, but at different times. Cutting wood with them was a learning experience for me. Yes, they modeled work for me. We cut and stacked and hauled a lot of firewood. While doing this, there was the back and forth sharing of ideas, the telling of jokes and stories, discussions of the natural world, bird identification, because my father was a longtime bird watcher, and on and on. It was the best classroom I could have been in, not only for what was bantered around, but also for what they modeled for me as adults. My interest in the arts was suspect to my peers, but amongst my father and his friends, I did not feel so unusual. One of them had been an artist and cartoonist since, I am assuming, before college. The wife of one of them had been a painter in college, and one of them taught literature. My childhood interest in becoming a children's book author and illustrator seemed like a pretty good possibility around these people. They were my mentors and my heroes. They became the pillars on which I built the person I was and the artist I became. So this follows a thread back to the title of the show, Working from Home. It isn't just the literal working from the couch in your living room, which is what I do, mostly because my wife was tired of me falling asleep while watching television with her. I needed to find something that would keep me tactily alert and verbally responsive, which doesn't always work, but it is better. For me, working from home means doing work that is more craft-oriented, more about repetition, and more about working by hand. My only tools are needles, scissors, and a needle nose pliers, and sometimes irregular pliers to pull the really tough needles through. It is also about sighting work. Sighting art process, not from the head and the studio, but from the daily life of the home of ourselves. Ourselves as experienced in our bodies, in our faces, in the things we do as ourselves. It is reflected in the clothing we cover ourselves with, in the way we project ourselves to the world, in the way we see ourselves as part of, yet apart from, our fellows. It is about the pattern and color of our daily lives. It is a contemporary living folk art. So you might ask the question, why does a grown man work most nights to stitch together non-utilitarian objects? You can't clean the house with what I make. Can't wash the dishes with them, that might be awkward. Can't eat with them, or can't eat them. So what could all this be for? I've always considered the creation of art to be an intellectual pursuit. Art making seeks to ask and answer questions about our daily lives, about the span of our lives, and about the inevitable end of our days. What once looked like a long journey into a landscape with an endless horizon now looks to me like a place with a not so distant destination. The artwork I am doing is focused on the little moments we have as human beings with limited individual time frames. They are bittersweet reminders that we all pass this way, and to hold these moments as reminders of our mortality. I also try to imagine that my ancestors will find delight in these objects and that they remain relevant and relatable in a future that I will never see. Anyway, there's my talk. So the rest of it is open to questions, which I'm sure you're all dying to ask questions, or not. But anybody have a question? That one doesn't count. Yeah.
Is there a work in the gallery that was particularly frustrating to construct?
Not necessarily frustrating. The woodcutters back there took about 6 weeks to put together. And that started from a photo that I had and trying to project that so that I got the scale of everything right. And then there were some of the figures changed. I used to be the central figure, but for me it wasn't about me. It was about those 5 guys. And so I changed things in that way, and they still had to work. Yeah, I don't usually have a hard time making these. They just take a while. So for any of you that, I remember hearing students complain about, I worked 2 hours on this and I'm done. And it's too bad. Because some of these are, 60, 80 or longer hour projects. Some of them go pretty quickly, but it just takes what the time it takes. Yeah.
Eric, I'm very curious about the process of conceptualization. When you start out, obviously you see a self-portrait of you, that you must have had that in mind when you started, but I wonder, the difference between a boy and his dog, the man and his dog, and the person swimming. Do you have that in mind when you start out, or do these things come to you in mid-process?
Some of them, basically the way that I started this all and pretty well continue through a lot of it is I was just trying to find form in stuffing up into something like a sock or and then trying to make that work. And so then you add a little bit onto it and it turns into this other thing, and then you add a little, and then that suggests other things, and so that's generally how that works. Some of them seem like a bigger project, but like all the heads that are on the wall was really just a head or a form finding excuse. I'm going to make these different forms in different ways. They're going to get sewn together and stuffed, and how am I going to bring out the features and the rest? And then they become individuals. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Pete.
Okay, so as we're looking at a lot of these things, what I think is so great is not only have you given such detail to like the central figure, but the way they're framed up with various different things. I mean, they're displayed in such. It's not just the textile, figures in the middle. There's these cool, awesome. I'm at a loss for words for what they are. Displays, frames, stages, puppet show theater kind of looking things. I mean, are you drawing these things out first? Do you have them all in your head? I mean, do you conceptualize the display first, second? Is it a happenstance thing?
It depends on the materials I have. I don't draw these out. Everything, it's a very intuitive process, and one thing leads to another, and depending on what I have around, a lot of these things that look like they came from some other source, or do come from other sources. There's recycled pump organs and bed frames and other kind of decorative elements from furniture, and they go together in a way that just makes sense to me. And so but they are very much like little stages. They're like little mini one-act plays without moving around very much. It's like Waiting for Godot, except nobody has any lines. You had a question.
You mentioned with the woodcutters that you were going from a reference picture. How often is that the case?
Oh, never.
Never.
Never, except for that one. Okay. Yeah. Do you want there to be more, or do you think there's more? Okay. That one needed that specifically because of that, because of what I was trying to accomplish. But after that, no. Anybody? Oh, Bill?
I was wondering if you could comment on your relationship with toys, because they all have really a playful look, and they all kind of cry out to be animated. So do you think toys and animation play a part in this?
There is the puppet thing over here. So that's always part of it, and I've always wanted to do like puppet theater, but I just haven't. Toys, not necessarily. Some of the earlier things were they were more an expression of different parts of myself. Like I would, like the vaudevillian with the ventriloquist dummy. I wanted to be a ventriloquist when I was about 11 years old. And so that, I just sort of remembered that and then put that together. And some of the others have been like that. But these all kind of have different genesis from other kinds of parts of my life. I don't know if you noticed the Sum of All My Fears pieces. They come from specific kind of references that always scared me as a kid. The biggest one is the Struwelpeter, which was a German kind of morality tale about not sucking on your fingers, or the tailor was going to come after you and chop your fingers off. So that one, that's what that is about. And for some reason, the cat in the book The Cat in the Hat came back was always terrifying, because this creature comes into their house, and so the title of that one is "You Should Not Be Here When Our Mother Is Out." So, and then the other one is is back to theater. It's the button molder from Ibsen's Peer Gynt, and so the character that comes after you because you haven't lived up to your potential, and he seeks to mold you into a pewter button. Yeah, fun toy, right?
I
Yes.
was wondering if you could talk about the practicality of it for our students. Like, how how do you even start this? They talked about stitching, but what do you do with stuff? Or like, how do you make those decisions? What do you use?
What do you mean?
Creating the stitches, like, so they're not all solid string, are they? Or are they? Like, does it vary?
They're different colors of embroidery floss, and so it's all about layering. It's just like painting, but doing it or mosaic or anything. It's just, you're just layering it in and getting the colors to work together. Some of the ones that are a little thicker are, I was like, I ran out of the wrong color at the wrong time, and I need to figure out how to make that work right. But
So their whole bodies, if it's covered with clothing, is it all?
no, it's just what you can see. Yeah. There was a hand back that, yes.
So is it like you start with like a sock or something that's stuck and then you stitch?
Yeah, I did that initially, and then eventually I found felt. The greatest material ever, because you can put it together, and the thread binds it together really nicely, and you can stuff it and it gets tight, and you can still stitch over the top of it, and it keeps its form. It doesn't collapse in on itself. And so, yes, it's along with the sheetrock screw and a driver bit on a drill, the greatest invention ever is felt. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
One of them over here has faces of individuals that, I think is my father's, now, the question I have is, did you do those from recollection of what they looked like?
You mean the one behind you? Or which one are you pointing at? Oh, in my father's house, yeah. To some degree, I now have those photos of my ancestors. I didn't have several of them before I made them, and so they were just sort of approximations. But so all those little portraits in the piece next to the quilt, those are all hand-stitched in black and white. But yeah, so it's not that it's necessary. I mean, it's not a self-portrait, but it does have my dad, my grandpa, my great-grandpa, my great-great-grandpa, and my great-great-great-grandpa in it. So, yeah.
So you come to this rather late. I'm curious that anyone else, maybe I'm just thinking of myself, what would be great, a door framer on this, and then I would say, yeah, that's a great idea. Too bad I don't know how to do that. But all the steps you've gone, all the shows that Jason recited, these are all things that build into this vocabulary of capabilities. And so you say, oh, you need this. Oh, not only do I have an idea, but I have an old piece of wood outside in the garage that'll work just right. Could you have done this show earlier in your career, like right out of school, or you built on all the last?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, technically I could have. I don't know that I would have had the idea to do this. And probably not. I mean, a lot of what I do more lately is give myself permission to do things that I never would have thought of as a student or as a postgraduate student.
Why is that?
There's just a level of seriousness that you're trying to have so people take you seriously, and now I don't care. I mean, they're still serious, but it's different. So much of this is craft, which is apart from the world of art in a lot of ways, but it also, there's a lot of places where art and craft come together and come together well. And so I'm trying to merge that more. Actually, you had a question.
Mine might have been answered, I've always been impressed with your relationship to materials. So do you think, do the materials come first and then inspire the work? Or, I look at a ton of like flannel and denim, like you just make what you make because you have a crazy amount of denim.
No, I go looking for stuff. It's, once I get to that point, it's like, well, it seems to need to wear jeans, Not all of them do. In fact, the man with the secret, I mean, that shirt that he's wearing should be, somebody should take that idea and make that into a full-size garment. It's such a wonderful garment. So I've become, pretty good at as a clothing designer. The handsome man back there, that's a pretty nice shirt. So, but it's very small. So, yeah.
I've heard someone say that they found your art creepy, and I was just wondering how you. It wasn't me.
It was a friend of mine's.
And I was just wondering how you said earlier that you've learned to not really care about what the audience thinks. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, what is your intent and how, and you said before about those ones over there, how does fear, like, play into this?
Not a lot. I'm not out there trying to scare anybody. If you make things that look like people get a little weirded out. Emily. Yes. How are you doing back there? Okay. All right. This is sort of tongue-in-cheek humor more than anything, although the Sturl Peter is basically just taking an illustration and turning it into that sculpture. But that was frightening. My grandmother was a assistant librarian in St. James, and when I would go and stay with them, or when I stayed with her one summer, I found that book on the shelf, and it was hot. It was so frightening. And, you look at it and go, and stick it back in, and I never looked for it after that. But I never forgot it either. So, being scared is not a bad thing. And, we like creepy stuff, don't we? So, yes?
Do these gentlemen have spouses that will show up?
No. I did the one female figure that I've done was I modeled after, my mother was a soybean queen up in northern Minnesota when she was a teenager, and I made this woman that had the sash and everything, and she was really homely. And my mother said, Eric, we were pretty. That was the last time I tried that. So, yeah.
So, Eric, I don't know, there's just something about your work that I look at it and it's like, it reminds me of you. And I see these things, and first of all, I just get the feeling like, not only are you going looking for maybe shirts and denim and things that go on these things, but I know you to be you remind me of my brother, who is a self-proclaimed pack rat, and you're kind of a guy who I just think, I imagine you're going on a walk, you see something, you go, oh, I'll use that, I'll pick it up off the ground and I'll use that later, and then it'll show up in something. There's this whimsy about it, and then I wonder if you could just quickly talk about the humor, because I look at all of this stuff, and I feel like embedded into these things, there's something that makes me feel kind of like, what about the whimsy? What about the humor of the things that you make?
I did a lot of cartoon work as I was younger, and I always liked liked what that did, but, you get that sort of trained out of you as you hit art school and and so, again, it's allowing that to come back into the things that you're doing, just because there is, life is silly. And I think, and I want these to be reflective of that. There's a seriousness to them, obviously, and there's a kind of poignancy to them as well, but they also are, so it covers that whole range of things that we experience in life, and not all of it is super dramatic. Some of it is, some of it's fun, some of it's, whatever. I think as far as these remind you of me, I have this image of me walking down the road shaking these things out of my sleeves because they come really easily like that. And if if I could get them to come faster, they'd come faster. But I think this to me seems like one of the best ways that I've found to express who I am, and in a way that is not off-putting because of, some overlay in some way, like an art overlay, like being serious about your art. I'm totally serious about this, but it's still fun. Yeah, sure.
So, I'm aware that you're also a musician, and you played in several of your songs, and it would be really fun to hear the music that would go along with the weapons, like that they had sung. Or if someone were to make a video of them with your music as the background, that would be really fun.
Well, there's something to think about. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Harlan.
That was a great segue.
What was that?
That was a great segue that she just mentioned. So I know your talent is a banjo maker, because I own one. And I get lots of compliments on it because it sounds so great. So I was looking over there at the Dogwood Banjo guy.
Yeah.
So what inspired that?
I just started making the head. All these are mostly, I just started making the heads, and then they turned into this. And so it started to look like Mike, and I just kept making it look like Mike.
Yeah, because I was looking at it, I said, that looks like Mike.
Yeah. So, yeah. So,
he's kind of hanging there like he's got a noose around him. But no, I mean, that was just my own imagination.
Sure. Thank you. You had a question?
Yeah, so you mentioned in the woodworking, or the wood chopping one, that all those men you're surrounded by were heroes. Did you know they were your heroes at the time, or did you discover it?
You kind of suspect something like that when you're a kid, or I don't know what, that's maybe not the best word, but I think I was in awe of a lot of them just because they were, most of them weren't my teachers. One of them was for a short period of time, but so your experience of them was mostly outside of any daily contact that you would have normally. Your teachers just turn into just a blank thing moving around, and you go, oh, there's that guy. So these guys were richer and more full than that to me, and then thinking back as I got older, that's when they take on an even more important role, even though I haven't seen many of them for decades. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Can you explain what it's like for you to be surrounded by a network of heroes?
I tried to in talking about them, I mean, it was really gratifying to be around people that had similar kind of artistic interests that were varied, and that they could talk about those things and feel comfortable in doing manual labor and talking about those things. And so that was, I think, the very interesting part of being around them and being mentored by them as time went on. There's like the crosshatch pattern that's in the back of that piece. I learned that from one of those guys. So, and I've been doing it for 50 years. So it has continued to be influential.
Eric? Are there other portraits, other stories that you want to tell about individuals that are represented here?
There really aren't very many portraits. I mean, there's the one of me, the self-portrait at mythical human scale. But I mean, they're all kind of self-portraits in a way, but not specifically. So, yeah. Sorry. Yeah?
I love your titles.
What do you love about those?
I think you just don't quit creating. It feels like the title card is a whole other project. That's what
Are they distracting?
No.
Okay.
I think they often open up the possibility of work.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I love your teeth so much. And I keep staring at them, and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts when you're creating that you can share with us in terms of, do you have moments where you realize the mouth can express this, or the eyes can express this, or the tilt of the head?
Sure. Yes, I do. These initially, spoiler alert, these were all going to be like a big tapestry of a bunch of guys looking into the sky, seeing whatever is happening. But I couldn't get them to really go together very well. But they were already made. So I had to take a side road and do something else. But so that's why they all have sort of a similar expression of surprise and or whatever on them. But they're good standalone things as well. Is that a good answer for you?
I would like to know a little bit more about what you and your therapist talk about.
No. Anybody here?
Do you still make instruments? Are you bored with it? I mean, this intrigues you and you love doing this now. And I know, like, as Jason mentioned at the start, you've gone through a lot of things.
I haven't made one for a little while. I still will, but I don't have time because I'm doing other things. And so during the day I work and then I end up repairing instruments. So I'm a little tired of instruments to some degree. And so then I come back, I come home and shift gears and do this. And it's, again, it's, just by starting something and then seeing what happens, it's sort of like planting a seed and then it turns into this plant and then you graft something else onto it and it turns into 3 different things. And so it's interesting how that works and it's never dull. And rather than having a set sort of programmatic, I'm going to do this, they become more delightful, I think, as you go along, because you're like, what? What? Where did that come from? And I made that. So you talk to yourself a lot. Wow, how did that work?
The pressure's off. You're really passionate and loving what you're doing, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway.
Do you make them one at a time, or do you have 3 or 4 going at the same time?
No, I do one at a time. Yeah, they're, yeah, I don't think, I mean, there was, like, all of those were going at the same time, but that was because they needed to fit together. They needed to be the right scale. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Hi.
I was just wondering, I know earlier you said that you were kind of inspired by quilts and stuff. So I'm wondering how the inspiration went from like quilts to, like a hand stitched puppet of, cat in a hat or whatever.
Yeah. Where's the self-portrait? Is that in between there? Okay, so that was my first attempt at doing any of this. And so I was just trying to sort of be a quilter, embroiderer. Do you sew? Do you do any of this stuff? Okay. So I don't know how to do this. I just launch into these things, and I expect that I'll figure some of it out as I go along. And so that one, I got to the fish part of it, and I thought, oh, he should have some dimension to it. So I stuffed it, and then it was like, oh, this is interesting. And so that led to doing that started basically all the rest of it. And I haven't done much 2D things like that since I did that. So, I mean, a few things, but not very much. Yes, Emily.
What was I'm trying to formulate this. How do you enjoy working with something soft versus, I know as a sculptor you have worked in so many other mediums. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as a fiber person, I like things that are soft, and hard things frustrate me a lot. So you now find that you prefer this thread and yarn and felt and things?
Well, yeah, I don't know that I necessarily prefer it, but it's a lot easier to have soft things in your lap on the couch at night as you're, trying to make it till 10 o'clock than having something hard and, whittling away and cutting yourself a dozen times because you're half asleep, and then you got to clean all that stuff up. I still scatter thread and clippings and stuff all over the place, and my wife follows me around and says, "There's one, there's one." So, but it is easier, and it is softer, and they're like big pillows in some ways, and so it is nice to sort of feel that something different like that. And the other thing too, and I don't know that I mentioned this so much, but the color aspect I think has really been intriguing, because and not like they're super colorful, but just the color relationships that you set up with what's happening with the face, what's happening with the clothing, that has to work. And so getting back to just color theory kinds of experience has been really fun. Like the big quilt back there was a lot of fun to create just in terms of color. It's a little, it didn't work out, it's a little not square, but again, I was making it by hand in my lap, not on a quilting frame. So it's amazing that it got to be that almost square. But yeah, color is, I mean, that's been a lot of the driving force behind this, is just making sure that what the surfaces are doing, that they seem right in terms of color. Does that make sense? Yeah.
One of the words that stands out to me is spontaneity. And
Fun and Andy? What? Fun?
Spontaneity.
Spontaneity. Oh, yeah, I don't hear very well either. Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to get that to work with something that takes 50 hours, but still remains spontaneous. And I wonder how much of your conscious effort is to try to preserve that feeling of spontaneity. How much does it just naturally just come out of you?
I don't know that I can answer that. I mean,
well, in a painting, you can quickly tell if something's getting heavy. It's overdone. But these take so long, and I imagine they're kind of slow going. So as the creator, it doesn't dawn on you if and when something's starting to get overproduced. Am I making sense?
yeah, no, I get it. It's I think that I'm already limiting that. There's not a lot of elements in these. They're pretty simple. They're like figures in a not very busy background or frame, and the frame is set up to, if there is a frame, to not be distracting in that way, to relate to what's going on, shape-wise or color-wise, or things like that. And so, but that's because, as I started out saying, I am a genius, Andy. And yeah. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Does AI threaten your workflow?
AI has nothing to do with my life. Anybody else? We do have a reception here after, so if you're done asking public questions, oh, well, there's one.
What is next? Are you going to continue all of these? Do you have a sort of direction you want to go?
I'm not sure. It's weird when you keep working on these, knowing that there's a show coming up, and you go, well, I got to get all this done, and then you actually take a break and go, wow, I have holes in my fingers from I don't really use thimbles because you can't feel anything. So now I can't feel anything, but at least I know where the needle is. So, and that, your hands get tired and dry from all the fabric and the thread and everything. And so, I'll just pick. Then you come back to felt, which again is the greatest invention of the 21st century. The drill and the driver and the screw that was the 20th century. So, okay, ask me anything you want after we stop. Are you still taking down chairs? Okay, so if you wouldn't mind taking the chairs and standing them up and putting them where? Okay. Thank you for coming.